Welcome to the debate. I'm your host, and today, as conference tournaments approach and the regular season is, well, practically in the rearview mirror, the entire college basketball world is entirely focused on one central question. Which four teams actually deserve the highly coveted #1 overall seeds in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, and the selection committee is facing an incredibly complex task this year. They are spending long hours in conference rooms in Indianapolis right now trying to build the S-curve.
Right, which, just as a quick reminder for anyone tuning in, is their process of ranking the entire tournament field from 1 to 68 before placing them into regional brackets. And to do that, they have to weigh a myriad of metrics, right? Things like the net rankings, wins above bubble, overall strength of schedule, and those crucial head-to-head matchups. Their ultimate goal is to differentiate the absolute elite tier of college basketball from the rest of the pack.
Exactly.
And this analysis we're doing today emerges directly from the committee's recent top 16 reveals and the evolving Associated Press top 25 data we've seen throughout the season. So I'll be arguing that the top 4 seeds should reward a team's overall body of work and historical efficiency metrics, meaning the traditional powerhouse quartet of Connecticut, UCLA, South Carolina, and Texas represent the rightful top line.
And I'll be representing the perspective that a true #1 seed must be forged in the absolute deepest conferences. I believe the committee needs to reward strength of schedule, punish uncompetitive losses, and heavily weight head-to-head results. So based on that criteria, UCLA should actually be the true overall #1, and Vanderbilt definitively deserves that fourth #1 seat over Texas.
All right, let's lay out our core positions right up front. From my perspective, the objective data dictates that Connecticut, UCLA, South Carolina, and Texas have proven themselves as the definitive top 4 teams in the country. Let's start with Connecticut. They are the undeniable overall #1 seed in my eyes. We're looking at an undefeated record and a Division I leading 51.6 net rating, which is simply astronomical.
It's a huge number, sure.
It really is. For those tracking the math, the net combines game results, schedule strength, game location, scoring margin, and net offensive and defensive efficiency. Connecticut is suffocating opponents with an astonishing 38.8-point average margin of victory. You simply can't argue with that level of statistical dominance. Furthermore, I'm standing my ground on defending Texas as the vital fourth #1 seed.
Wow. Okay.
The Longhorns have built an incredible resume rooted in their non-conference wins above bubble. It's a great metric that tells us exactly how many more games this team won against their schedule compared to what an average tournament bubble team would do. Plus, we can't forget the trump card they hold. They secured neutral site victories against both UCLA and South Carolina on back-to-back days at the Players' Era Championship in Las Vegas. That is the very definition of a tournament-tested resume.
Right. Well, I come at it from a different way. We have to dig into the limitations of raw metrics. And when we do, Connecticut's status as the overall #1 becomes highly questionable. To me, the true overall #1 seed belongs to UCLA. The Bruins are undefeated in the Big Ten, which is arguably the most grueling, physically punishing conference in the country this season.
Certainly a gauntlet.
Oh, absolutely. They possess the #1 net strength of schedule, and they've amassed an incredible 16 Quad 1 victories. Compare that to Connecticut's 5 Quad 1 wins, and the gap in resume quality is absolutely glaring. Furthermore, I have to push back hard against Texas securing that final #1 seed. That honor belongs to Vanderbilt. The selection committee explicitly values head-to-head results and being competitive in losses. Texas failed both of those tests spectacularly when they played Vanderbilt. The Longhorns trailed the Commodores by as many as 26 points before ultimately losing 86-70. You simply cannot reward a team with a top seed when they completely fold against direct competition on the exact same seed line.
Okay, well, let's dive directly into that battle for the overall #1 seed then, because I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning. You're effectively punishing Connecticut for the conference they play in, rather than evaluating how flawlessly they've executed against the schedule placed in front of them. The Huskies boast the nation's absolute best defense, sporting his 69.6 defensive rating.
Yeah, their defense is stout.
Exactly, and we aren't just talking about winning games here. We're talking about historical execution. When you look at their conference play, they are beating opponents by an average of 42.3 points. They are essentially playing perfect basketball. The coaching staff has implemented an offensive scheme rooted in constant motion and elite ball movement that Big East opponents simply can't solve.
But is that the scheme, or is that the opponents?
Well, the committee's criteria, specifically the net rankings and wins above bubble, are explicitly designed to measure how dominant a team is against their given schedule. Connecticut ranks first in net and second in wins above bubble. They have 4 victories by at least 50 points. You mathematically cannot formulate a better season than the one the Huskies are currently having.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the sheer disparity and the level of resistance these two teams face night in and night out? Yes, Connecticut is incredibly efficient, but the Big Ten is vastly deeper than the Big East this season. The Big Ten currently has 10 different teams ranked in the top 30 of the net rankings. The Big East has almost none.
That's fair.
UCLA has to navigate an absolute minefield every single week. What a true gauntlet really looks like is playing a top 15 defensive team on the road on a Tuesday night, traveling halfway across the country, and playing another top 20 offensive team on a Saturday afternoon. To emerge undefeated in conference play against that schedule is historically significant. And let's look at UCLA's efficiency numbers against that elite competition. They boast a top 5 net rating of plus 41.6 points per 100 possessions.
Right, which is fantastic.
It is. They are executing at an elite level while taking the best punch from Quad 1 opponents 16 different times. And as a reminder, Quad 1 represents high-quality matchups based on the opponent's ranking and whether the game is at home, on the road, or neutral. The sheer volume of those elite wins UCLA has accumulated makes them infinitely more battle-tested than Connecticut.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The committee evaluates the entire body of work, and Connecticut has also tested itself in the non-conference slate, securing major victories early in the year to establish that foundational net ranking. They didn't just stumble into mathematical dominance. But actually, your point about surviving a gauntlet brings us perfectly to the other major point of contention.
The SEC.
Yes, the massive logjam in the Southeastern Conference and the battle for the final #1 seed between Texas and Vanderbilt. Now, I see why you think that Vanderbilt's head-to-head win is the defining factor, but let me give you a different perspective. Texas has the 8th best net strength of schedule in the entire country. Vanderbilt's strength of schedule sits down at 36th. When we talk about the complete body of work, Texas has the ultimate trump card. They went to Las Vegas and beat UCLA and South Carolina on a neutral floor. Those are 2 teams universally agreed to be on the #1 seed line. Vanderbilt does not have non-conference victories of that magnitude. Texas proved they can beat the absolute best teams in the country in a tournament environment, which is exactly what March is all about.
I understand the allure of those Las Vegas wins, I really do. But you can't simply gloss over the fact that Texas was exposed in their head-to-head matchup against Vanderbilt. We know for a fact that the selection committee has a specific, printed list of criteria they go down when evaluating teams. Head-to-head is on that list. Competitive and losses is on that list.
Sure, but
Texas went into that game against Vanderbilt and trailed by 26 points. They were run off the floor. The coaching staff themselves publicly questioned the team's toughness after that 86-70 defeat. Vanderbilt, on the other hand, started the season 19-0. They built a top 35 defense that completely dismantled the Longhorns' offensive game plan by switching all screens and denying perimeter ball reversals.
It was a bad matchup for them that night, certainly.
In a debate between 2 teams fighting for the exact same seed line, the team that capitalized on the other's vulnerabilities and blew them out by double digits has to get the nod. Vanderbilt proved it on the court when it mattered most.
But bracketology requires looking at the totality of the season, not just one isolated, disastrous evening. Every great team has an off night in conference play, especially in a league as physically demanding as the SEC. Texas still holds the higher wins above bubble ranking because their early season performance was so dominant.
I just don't think you can ignore a 26-point deficit.
Well, if we're looking for teams that could potentially disrupt this top 4 entirely and crash the party, we have to evaluate the dark horses, and if any team were to crash the #1 seed line, it would be LSU, who currently sits at #5 in the net rankings.
Oh, LSU, okay.
yes, the Tigers are an absolute offensive juggernaut. Early in the season, they were averaging over 112 points per game, repeatedly breaking the century mark.
They have a top 5 offensive rating, scoring between 124 and 130 points per 100 possessions. Their ability to outscore opponents is historic. They utilize a relentless pace and space system that exhausts defenses. And if they make a run in the SEC tournament, that raw offensive firepower could absolutely sway the committee.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why LSU should absolutely not be considered for a number 1 seed. Their non-conference schedule was notoriously, almost comically weak. Early in the season, their opponents had a 29% average win percentage. That ranked 353rd in Division I basketball.
It wasn't the strongest slate, I'll admit.
You can't reward a team with a number 1 seed when they intentionally schedule opponents in the bottom third of the net rankings just to artificially inflate their offensive statistics. We've seen this strategy from coaching staffs before. They schedule guaranteed wins in November and December to build confidence and pad their efficiency numbers before conference play. While it might look great on a spreadsheet, it doesn't prepare a team for March, nor does it earn the respect of the committee when compared to teams playing grueling schedules. If we're talking about a true dark horse for a number 1 seed, it has to be Iowa.
Iowa? I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because Iowa has 5 losses on their resume. How do you justify jumping a 5-loss team over the elite SEC tier that we just discussed?
You justify it by looking at the quality of their schedule and the quality of their wins. Iowa sits at 23-5, but they possess the number 2 net strength of schedule in the country. They rank 6th overall in wins above bubble. They are playing in that incredibly deep Big Ten conference, and they are putting on absolute defensive clinics. Just look at their statement win over Michigan.
That was a solid game.
It was a tactical masterclass. They beat them 62-44, leading for 75% of the game, and they held the Wolverines to just 31% shooting from the floor. That wasn't just a win. They took away driving lanes, controlled the pace, and dictated terms for 40 straight minutes. That is the kind of battle-tested, high-level execution that translates to tournament success. Iowa's resume is built on substance and navigating adversity, whereas LSU's early resume was built on style points against entirely inferior competition.
That Iowa defensive performance was certainly impressive, but speaking of teams that dictate terms, we haven't given nearly enough time to South Carolina because they are universally accepted as a lock for a number 1 seed.
Absolutely.
They possess a 29-2 record and sit at number 3 in the net rankings. But the reason they are so fascinating in this debate and why they serve as the gold standard for evaluating these resumes is how they achieve their dominance. They have an elite rebounding presence, boasting a 58.1% rebounding rate. That rebounding rate isn't just a stat, it's a psychological weapon.
It breaks teams down.
Exactly. By dominating the glass, they control the tempo of the entire game, turning the chaotic SEC style of play into a grinding half-court battle that their opponents simply aren't built to survive. Their ability to maintain that level of success year after year against the elite athletes in their conference is why their resume is practically bulletproof. They beat the teams in front of them with sheer physical dominance, second chance points, and suffocating defensive rebounding.
I completely agree that South Carolina's placement on the number 1 seed line is secure, and their rebounding philosophy is exactly why. But their resume perfectly illustrates the grueling, cannibalistic nature of the SEC this season. I've said it before, the SEC is basically crabs in a bucket right now. Every time one team climbs to the top, another pulls them back down.
Very true.
The conference is an absolute gauntlet, with more than half the league spending time in the AP Top 25. Because they all play each other, they inevitably hand each other losses. South Carolina, Texas, Vanderbilt, and LSU are all beating each other up in these highly physical, emotionally draining matchups. This is exactly why evaluating the SEC resumes against a team like UCLA is so incredibly complex.
Right, trying to weigh different conferences is always the challenge.
UCLA managed to survive the Big Ten conference with similar depth without taking a single conference loss. The SEC cannibalizes itself, making it incredibly difficult to rank their top tier. It makes the margins razor thin, which brings us right back to why Vanderbilt's head-to-head blowout over Texas is the only logical tiebreaker for that final spot. When the margins are that thin, you have to look at what happened when the two teams actually shared a court.
And I hear that, but let's look at how the committee processes that exact scenario.
During the mock selection exercises that the NCAA hosts in Indianapolis, committee members are instructed to look beyond simple head-to-head results when the overall season resumes have significant disparities. When you place the resumes side by side, Texas simply has better wins across a larger sample size.
But the direct matchup.
Texas played a more difficult schedule overall, generated a higher non-conference wins above bubble, and secured those massive neutral site victories against top-tier opponents. Vanderbilt had a phenomenal game against Texas. Absolutely. Their defensive scheme worked perfectly that night. But a single head-to-head result does not erase an entire season's worth of data. The objective metrics, the net rankings, the offensive and defensive efficiencies, the wins above bubble, they all point to a clear top tier that separates Texas from Vanderbilt in the grand scheme of the season.
That's true in a vacuum, but the committee is made up of human beings who watch these games. Recent results and trajectory are real factors in the room. When Vanderbilt dismantled Texas in late February, that leaves a lasting impression. It proves the ceiling of the Commodores and exposes the floor of the Longhorns. If you're seeding teams to reflect who they are right now in March, Vanderbilt is playing superior basketball, just as UCLA is playing superior basketball against a significantly harder schedule than Connecticut.
The eye test definitely matters to them.
It has to. We can't become slaves to raw efficiency metrics generated against bottom-tier conference opponents or padded non-conference schedules. The depth of the challenge and how a team responds to being punched in the mouth by an equal opponent must dictate the seed.
As we draw this discussion to a close, let me summarize my position. The NCAA Selection Committee relies heavily on objective data for a reason. It separates the emotion of a single game from the reality of a 30-game season. When you look at the net rankings, wins above bubble, and elite non-conference victories, the data ultimately dictates that Connecticut, UCLA, South Carolina, and Texas are the rightful 4 number 1 seeds. Connecticut's historical margins of victory and flawless execution make them the undisputed overall number 1, and Texas's willingness to schedule and defeat elite opponents on neutral floors earns them that final spot on the top line.
And I'll summarize my contrasting view. Resumes must be evaluated on the depth of the challenge presented to the team, not just the final score or a stylized metric. UCLA's total dominance of the Quad 1 category, navigating the deepest conference in the country without a loss, puts them at the absolute top of the board. And when evaluating the final number 1 seed, head-to-head results matter deeply. Vanderbilt's absolute blowout of Texas proves they are the superior team when the lights are brightest and the pressure is highest. They earned that final top seed on the court.
Ultimately, both of our perspectives highlight the immense difficulty the NCAA Selection Committee faces in that room in Indianapolis. They have to balance overall season-long metrics against head-to-head results and weigh the raw efficiency of blowing out inferior teams against the absolute grind of surviving a brutal top-tier conference schedule.
Absolutely. There is no perfect mathematical formula to solve a bracket. The value of looking at these team trajectories from multiple analytical angles is that it reveals the nuances behind the numbers. Strength of schedule, competitive losses, strategic non-conference scheduling, and peak performance all weave together to create a team's true identity heading into the tournament.
There is so much more to explore in this tournament data. We invite our listeners to dive deeper into the metrics, look at the wins above bubble, the Quad 1 records, and the defensive ratings, and form your own bracket conclusions as Selection Sunday approaches. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.